The wind snatched at his clothes as he leaned precariously far out over the edge of the tower. Below him the sea stretched out, sparkling and merciless. Escape by land was impossible. Escape by sea, well, that was madness. So he did the only thing he could. He looked up. High above him, the clouds brushed against the peak of the towering walls that surrounded the island, trapping him and his father, the great inventor Daedalus, at the top of the tallest tower. There was only one way to go, up, into the very heavens themselves. But how? The answer came in a rush of inspiration, and with it, the blueprint for the most daring escape in history. The only way out was through the air. For years, Daedalus had studied the flight of birds, observing their every move, memorizing their every beat, understanding the lift of their wings. Now, using the feathers of doves and the wax of the honeycomb, he crafted 2 pairs of large wings. Each wing was bound together with thread as strong as tendon. Then he sealed each feather in place with beeswax. At last, the wings were finished, a miracle of engineering, a pathway to freedom. But who would take flight first? The father or the son? Well, that was easy. It had to be the son. After all, it was Icarus, the boy king of Athens, whose wings needed unfurling first. Soon enough, he stood before his father, resplendent in his new plumage, ready to taste the freedom of the birds. Before they took flight, though, Daedalus had to give his son a solemn warning. "Do not fly too low, for the sea spray will weigh down your wings, nor too high, for the sun will melt the wax." With those words of warning echoing in his ears, Icarus spread his wings and leaped from the tower. For a moment, there was nothing but the wind screaming past his ears and the pounding of his heart in his chest. But then, something magical happened. Up, up, up they soared, higher and higher, the blue ocean unfurling beneath them like a thick carpet. Far below, the king's guards looked up in wonder as the 2 winged figures circled lazily above them. The great escape was a success. For the first time, a mortal tasted the freedom of the birds. The feeling was intoxicating, godlike, and nobody, not even Daedalus, could have blamed Icarus if he had decided to stay up there forever. But alas, the young prince was far too full of himself. As soon as he heard his father's shouts of warning, he broke into laughter. What was his father saying? He was Icarus, the boy king of Athens, and he could do whatever he wanted. Like, why should he stay up here with his old man when he could fly up, up, up into the heavens themselves? Higher, higher, up where the sun caressed his face and its warmth melted his cares away. Oh yes, this was the life. To soar above the earth, to dance among the clouds, to feel the sun and the wind in his hair. What a glorious, wonderful feeling. Higher, higher. Let the old man stay down there with his boring old wings. Icarus was going to touch the sun, but the sun does not suffer mortals to touch it. As Icarus approached, its heat intensified, and the wax holding together his wings began to melt. Feathers began to peel off, drifting away on the wind, and his face turned from joy to terror as he began to plummet toward the sea. Down, down, down he fell, the sun blazing in his face, mocking him, taunting him. At last, the water rushed up to meet him, and with a sickening lurch, he knew that he was falling, really falling. His wings were gone, his flight of glory, a fall of hubris. He, Icarus, the mighty flyer, was nothing but a drowning, dying boy. Yet somehow, some way, he had to get out of this mess. Summoning every last scrap of strength, he flapped his arms, but it was no use. Splash. The cold water closed over his head, and with a final shuddering breath, Icarus, the boy king of Athens, drowned. His father's warnings echoed in his ears as the waves dragged him down into the black abyss. Too late. He had flown too high. The wax had melted, the feathers drifted away, and the sea was rising to claim him. But maybe, just maybe, his father would be okay. Maybe old man Daedalus still had a chance to fly free. But he didn't. No, because in that moment, as the waves crashed over him and the salt water stung his eyes, Daedalus knew that he wasn't just losing his son, he was losing himself as well. For what was he without his boy? Without Icarus, the greatest escape in history would become the greatest tragedy. The great inventor Daedalus paced the length of his prison cell, his shadow growing ever longer on the wall as the sun dipped toward the horizon. Outside, the waves of the Cretan sea crashed against the towering walls of his prison, a grim reminder of his captivity. It had been 7 long years since King Minos had tricked him into this labyrinth, 7 years since he'd seen the sun or felt the wind on his skin. But in his eyes, there was no despair, only the glint of an idea taking shape. For Daedalus was not just any man, he was a master craftsman, the creator of wondrous machines and contraptions, the very man who had built these very prison walls. And he had a son, Icarus, a boy whose mother had died giving him life, a boy who had grown up in the shadow of his father's genius. And now Daedalus was going to use all his skills and all his knowledge to get himself and his son out of this prison. How? By capturing the very essence of freedom itself, by stealing a gift from the gods, by building wings. But how could a man build wings? He wasn't a god, nor did he have access to godly materials. But in the flight of the gulls that circled outside his window every day, Daedalus saw his solution. Their wings might be made of flesh and bone, but they were held together by feathers, and feathers could be replaced. As the light faded from the sky, Daedalus began his work. His tools were simple, but his vision was anything but. He began gathering feathers that the birds had left behind on the windowsill, as well as those that fell from the sky into the courtyard below, where young Icarus would gather them for his games. Then he needed wax. So while Icarus slept, Daedalus melted down candles, saving every drop. It was slow, painstaking work, but it had to be done in secret. If King Minos found out what he was up to, he would crush them both. Still, over weeks and months, they gathered their materials in secret. Every feather, a piece of their future, every drop of wax, a bond for their escape. While Daedalus worked with grim determination, his son Icarus saw it as a game, chasing feathers in the wind, unaware that they were building his destiny. But soon enough, the wings began to take shape, and Icarus, with his innocent heart, began to wonder. Daedalus saw it as a miracle. 2 pairs of great wings, each as big as a man's torso, formed not of magic, but of genius and desperation. And when they were finished, they were a sight to behold. They looked as if they had been plucked from some great angel. Icarus looked at them with the pure wonder of a child. But Daedalus saw them for what they were, a testament to a father's will to save his son, a miracle, but a fragile one. He carefully strapped the smaller wings onto Icarus's shoulders, his hands trembling slightly. The young boy giggled, flapping his new wings, and Daedalus felt his own heart soar, but he had to be the voice of reason. Tears streamed down his face as he gave his warning. "Icarus, my son," he pleaded, "you must follow me closely. Keep to a middle path. Do not fly too low, for the damp sea spray will soak your wings and drag you down. And Icarus, I beg you, do not fly too high, for the fires of the sun will melt the wax, and you will fall." Then, taking a deep breath, Daedalus put on his own wings. They stood at the edge of the tower's opening, the wind whipping around them. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. This was their only chance. They shared a final, determined look, then spread their wings and leapt into the open air. For a glorious moment, they flew. They soared above the rooftops of the city, the wind rushing through their feathers, the ground falling away beneath them. Below them, King Minos watched in disbelief as the 2 figures flew away from his grasp. His face contorted with anger and frustration. He had been cheated. But high above him, Daedalus and Icarus were free, free to roam the skies, free to explore the world. The only sound was the wind whistling past their ears and the soft beating of their wings. As they flew, Icarus turned to his father and shouted over the noise of the wind, "We're flying, Papa, we're flying!" And Daedalus, looking down at his son, knew that this moment, this feeling of freedom, was worth all the struggle, all the pain, all the fear. Because in that moment they weren't just flying, they were soaring. They were touching the sky. And for a brief, beautiful moment, they were truly free. This is the story of Icarus, the boy who flew too close to the sun. Part 1. The Freedom of the Sky. They had done the impossible. A mortal father and son now danced among the clouds, masters of the sky. Below them, fishermen and shepherds looked up from their work, mistaking them for gods descending from Olympus. The world was a map of blue and green beneath them, and freedom was a taste on the wind. Icarus laughed, a sound as bright and carefree as the bells of the mountain goats. He looped and soared, feeling the wind tear through his hair, whipping his face, daring him to go higher. He glanced back at his father. Daedalus was there, of course, wings spread wide, harnessing the wind currents, guiding them safely from the cliffs of Crete into the boundless expanse of the Aegean. But his father was in the distance, far away from the sun, which shone like honey and gold, like a god smiling down on them. Icarus grinned, showing the teeth that had once bitten into the fruit of the pomegranate. Death would have to wait. Not today. Not when the sky was this boundless, this magnificent, this free. He swam past his father, and without looking back, because he didn't need to, he knew what lay below them, the endless sea, the circling gulls, the tiny ants that were men going about their tiny lives. He climbed higher, driven by the fatal pride that whispers to mortals that they can be as great as the gods. He flew towards the sun, but the sun is a god of fire, and it does not suffer the touch of mortal arrogance. The heat intensified. Its golden rays became scorching fingers. The sweet-smelling wax that held his freedom together began to fail. First one drop, then another. A tear ran hot and fast down Icarus's cheek. The first tear he'd ever cried for himself. His wings disintegrated. The miracle of flight was unmade in an instant. The boy who thought himself a god was suddenly just a boy again, suspended between the heavens he tried to conquer and the sea that waited to claim him. He fell, and the only thing he left behind in the sky was a single desperate cry that tore through his father's heart. Part 4. A Father's Sorrow. Daedalus circled helplessly above the waves, crying his son's name. What had he done? He had taught Icarus to fly, yes, but he had also taught him everything else, how to read the wind, how to shape the wings, how to dream of freedom. How could he have let go? Why hadn't he held on to his son's hand, pulled him back from the brink? In his grief, he dropped lower, searching the waves, his heart breaking with every stroke of his wings. All he saw were scattered feathers floating on the water's surface. He landed on a lonely beach, his genius granting him a safe haven, his solitude a curse. He buried his son there, forever naming the island Icaria in his memory. The sea that stole his child would forever be known as the Icarian Sea. Daedalus, the man who could build anything, had lost the one thing he could never replace. And that's the end of Part 3 of our retelling of the myth of Icarus. Stay tuned for the final part of this series, where we explore the question, was Icarus right to try and fly so high? To get more myths like this one delivered straight to your inbox, subscribe to our newsletter. Thanks for watching.